Hi folks, it's Alan here again. Let's go do a little bit of a video about watches again. It was about a year ago today that I had the original Rolex Explorer 2 216570, so it's the new orange hand black dial, and I had the problems with it and everything else, and it went back, blah blah blah. So that's about a year ago today. I've been having a look. I'm close, I believe, to pulling the trigger on another Rolex, but I've had a bit of a look around and there was a number of models. I'm still I looked at another 216570 white dial the other day. I don't really like the white dial one as much as the black, but I noticed the new model, it sort of swings and roundabouts. You've got the benefit of the new bracelet, which, you know, is flawless. So I put on an old Rolex Explorer, the 16570, and I love the height of the actual watch on the wrist, you know, so when it's on there it just doesn't feel as high. Very quickly afterwards tried the 21650, 216570, and it's just got that quite a bit of extra height. So you're sitting thinking to yourself, you know, if this is going to be an actual tool watch, would you actually be better off with the older one? It's slightly smaller in terms of width. I think the height helps, and it just seems to sort of be more discreet, and you don't have the crown digging into your, you know, the base of your wrist. So that was quite interesting. So I quite like the old one from that point of view. I still like that orange hand. So it's difficult, you know, first world problems. What do you buy? I wasn't keen, obviously, on the old clasp on the old Oyster bracelet. It just seemed pretty cheap and flimsy. I've seen a very similar sort of clasp on an old Seconda, you know, years ago. So it doesn't inspire huge amounts of confidence, that clasp. It's probably safe enough, but it just doesn't feel like it's got the quality. But the only other difference as well in the watch was the weight. I did notice the new one, because I think the links are solid rather than hollow. Quite a bit of difference in weight. So you buy the new one, you feel like you're getting something that's got a bit of weight in it, you know, which is quite nice in a way. But I think the older's more practical. But then I'm sort of thinking, and I'm going to put a bit of a UK slant on this. I keep seeing videos with, oh, you know, buy used, or you'll pick up an Explorer 2 old model for, you know, $2,500 or some crap like that, or certainly less than what myself and the other guys here in the UK have seen. You can, if you were stupid, pay as much as $4 grand for a late 90s Explorer 2, which I think is ridiculous. If you're prepared to shop around, you might find them for $3.5, and if you pushed a dealer down, you might get it nearer the $3 grand mark. But, you know, $3 grand is quite a lot of money to be spending on a watch that's 16 plus years old. Pretty interesting. So, and obviously you could buy a new Oyster Perpetual for that money. So, you know, do you buy a brand new Oyster Perpetual and have all of the goodness of the 10-year service cycle and the 5-year warranty, or do you take a chance? Now that sort of brings me to this used thing. I was also interested in the Datejust 2 41mm, the previous sort of kind of generation with the, well, it's still kind of the current. I don't know whether they're going to throw that in the bin now that these new models are out at Baselworld. I don't know, but it's the one with the silver dials, very nice. But again, it does ride quite high. So as a daily wearer, I think my existing watch there, the C-Dub, you know, it's took a lot of scuffing around the edge. And if you think of something like that height or more, you know, you're going to be paying what? It's 4,800 new. The dealer was going to do it for 4,500. Do you really want to be scuffing and bumping a $4.5 grand watch every single day on polished steel? I'd probably feel a little bit more happy doing that on a brushed steel model. So I don't want to spend 4.5 on a model that's going to get get battered to shit. But then at the same time, I'm not prepared to pay knocking on the door of 4 or 3.5 for something that's a bit more practical. But you think, well, hang on a minute, I've spent the thick side of $4,000 on a watch, and you want something that wee bit special. So it's quite a difficult dilemma. But on the used models, and I think I suppose the advice I put out about a year ago about used, if you're happy to buy new, it's sort of $4.5, $5,000, fine. If you buy used, you're still left with that dilemma of, I don't think the savings are huge. The prices are knocking on the door of the recommended retail price in the UK, even for quite old models. And then on top of that, you've got the issue of used. Now, I had a look at a couple of used models. And what sort of has jumped off the page for me when I was chatting to the guy and the dealer, I'm not going to mention who the dealer is, but I mean, all dealers are pretty much the same. You get small independent dealers. They've got a little ante room at the side with a couple of guys in white coats that do a little bit of testing. They test the depth thing and that, and probably they'd be able to swap seals and stuff like that. But when I pushed them on, okay, so if I buy here, you give me a year's warranty, blah, 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 what's the sort of story? I thought that independent dealers had trouble getting parts. So what's the story there? And they basically said, well, we'd probably send it away somewhere else. So you sort of think to yourself, well, okay, you buy a watch, let's see even you just paid the 4K for an old beat up Explorer 2. You're fine for a couple of weeks or a month or so. It cocks up. You go back in, use your 1 year warranty, they take it in, they check it. Where is it going to go? They didn't seem to be able to provide a concrete explanation of, say, well, no, do you know what? We're going to look after you. That watch is going to get flipped straight back to Rolex, or we've got this Rolex authorised kind of repair centre here, XYZ, boom, it would just go straight there, end of, no mucking about. And I'm not too sure that I would be happy to spend 3, 4, 5 grand on a used Rolex that probably hasn't been serviced, maybe hasn't been looked after, has maybe gone in and got regulated repeatedly and fiddled about with. And then, if you have a problem, really what you want to do is, if you want to buy a used, you really ought to factor in the price of a proper Rolex service in the price. You'd have to, which was what, about 500 or 600 quid or something in that ballpark. You'd have to factor that into the price, because I think the local dealer is only going to kind of polish it up, change the seals, maybe test the timing a little bit on the machine, and maybe test the waterproofness with the bell jar or whatever they use. That's nice, but if they don't have access to Rolex parts, I think that is going to result in substandard service ultimately at the end of the day, or they're going to be limited in what they can do. Whereas if it goes to Rolex, vintage pieces aside, if there's a bit in it that's needing replacing, they're going to do it. And not muck about, and they're going to have the skills and the techniques. It really is an artisan business, looking after these watches. And I'm not saying the guys knocking around in the back rooms of some of these dealers don't know how to open up the back and regulate it and do a couple of things, but I think there's a world of difference between that and the world of white lab coats and people that float on air and smelt their own gold up at Rolex. I think it's a completely different world. So I think what I'm basically saying is I'd be erring towards, if I was going to shell out that kind of money, I think I'd be more likely to buy a Datejust 2, and have something that looks nice. Know that you've got the peace of mind with a warranty. I think VAT in the UK, this is what the guys abroad don't realise, VAT in the UK is 20%. So when you're talking about, $8,000-9,000 here and there, and go in and screw the dealer's balls to the table, blah, 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 you ain't going to get that in the UK. You'll probably get maybe between 200 and 500 off here in the UK, depending on the model, if you're lucky. But 20% goes to the government in VAT. It's not sales tax, which is 5 or 6% in the US or whatever. It's 20% here. So the margins, I don't think the shops here are prepared to give you the margins on it, because they've got to pay the VAT. And that's even reflected in the in used prices as well. If you look at used prices, you tend to find them 10 to 15% higher here than anywhere else in Europe. So there we go. A few thoughts post Baselworld. I'll catch up with you guys later if I pull the trigger. Ta-ra.